And hello, Hearts of Oak. Thanks so much for joining us once again. And it's wonderful to have Dr. Sebastian Gorka back with us again. Eileen's finest. Sebastian, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you. That's quite an unusual introduction, but I'm proud to be a kid who grew up in the queen of the suburbs, Ealing, West London. So thank you for reminding me of my former life.
Queen of the suburbs. And obviously, Seb Gorka, Deputy Assistant to the President and Senior Advisor for Counter-Terrorism National Security Council. And I was going to there are many things that President Trump accomplished in 2017 to 2021 in his first term. But in terms of, I think, understanding the threat, and you understand the threat, Seb, from Islam and the impact that has on the West, it seemed as though he has entered this term with I guess, a renewed fervor, but a greater perception, maybe, of the threat. Maybe touch on that before we get into some of the huge success that the president has had in this term.
Yeah, I mean, we could talk about the successes of the president, till the cows come home, probably for the next few weeks, because it is just, look, he's 25 years older than me. The biggest problem we have in this administration is we cannot keep up with the commander-in-chief. I live what is called skiff life. My counterterrorism team and myself work in a secure compartmented information facility because, our work is classified. So we have to leave our cell phones outside. And when we come out of the skiff, we check our phones and we say, oh my gosh, what did he just do in the last 30 minutes? What, peace deal number 8? And we just keeping up with the man, whether it's the drug boats, the tariffs, sealing the border, the visit to the Middle East. It's truly, it is unbelievable. And I think, as one of my colleagues in the administration said right at the beginning, he said, the biggest mistake the naysayers and the haters make, and also the mainstream media, who are all cretins, really, is they think this is a second administration of President Trump. No. As he put it, this is the great Mike Waltz, our ambassador to the UN. He said, you need to understand, we are in the 9th year of the Trump administration. Why? Because the idiots, the mainstream media, the detractors, thought President Trump was golfing for the last 4 years. No. We were preparing. He was getting ready. How is it that the first day, do you remember that he gets sworn in as the commander-in-chief for a second time? He doesn't go to the White House. He goes to a rally in D.C. where we pulled out a little table for him so he could start signing the first executive orders. He signed 12 before he was in the White House at the Resolute desk for the beginning of his second term. So it's called a full court press. And one of the hardest things that we tried but failed to achieve in the first Trump administration was designating the Muslim Brotherhood. But this historic event that we're starting to slice it piece by piece, chapter by chapter, and that we designated the first 3 chapters, including the OG, the granddaddy of global jihad, which is the Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood, just a few weeks ago. That it just reinforces one thing, Peter. We are living in historic times, all of us, whether you're on that side of the pond or this side of the pond. And this is the most consequential president of the modern age, whether it's the designation of the Brotherhood or whether it's anything, the tariffs. I mean, I'm not an economist, but let me assure you, Scott Bessent is a friend of mine. What the president is doing with the tariffs alone is rewriting global trade and economics for the next 50 to 100 years. This is completely reshaping the Bretton Woods inheritance of the globalized, take America for, an idiot, exploit our open free trade agreements. We're ending all of that. So yes, it's just exciting time to be alive.
There's so many questions I could ask you, but the tariffs is interesting because I think I read that it was about 8 or 9% of income tax where you are. I mean, you could obliterate property tax. I mean, literally, the options are there. Whenever you have the money coming in from trade, you've got the options at home to do things that no politician has ever had the idea before. And in that way, President Trump can actually redo how Americans are taxed.
It's not just the tariffs. We just had the Christmas party this week in the White House, and the president started his speech with his favorite line, I think it is, of late, and he talks about, "We are the hottest nation in the world." As the king of Saudi Arabia told me a year ago, you were dead, and now you're the hottest. And this isn't just, some interlocutor. Look at the figures. More than $18 trillion of investment. I mean, when he went to the Middle East for his historic, trip recently, inside the White House, we were whispering to each other, maybe he brings back $1 trillion of investment. Maybe he comes back with 4.7 trillion. Like, just blowing anything out of the water, the expectations we have. And what does that mean? Jobs for Americans. It means, completely jettisoning the establishment, rhino, fake conservative, pro-globalist agenda that who needs jobs? You can outsource them to Mexico, China, Canada, who cares? No, with trillions coming in, not only can you give massive tax breaks, which we just did with the biggest tax break in US history, you're also going to do what? Create jobs the likes of which we haven't seen since the post-World War II burgeoning of the American economy. So look, there's a reason that working class, blue collar, dyed-in-the-wool Democrats from, steel belt, rust belt cities voted for the billionaire from Queens, because he loves America and everything he does is for one reason and one reason alone, for the interests of the American people. It's not complicated.
Well, I want to delve in. You mentioned the Muslim Brotherhood, and I want to delve into that. But first of all, as a Brit, I want to know. I was talking to my younger son on the way home from school, and he was saying, "What? President Trump is going to fine the BBC 7.5 trillion or billion?" And he was trying to get his head around this. He was going, "Okay, let me check how much the BBC is worth." And I thought, we were discussing the car. Maybe President Trump will obliterate the BBC. How do you, because you as a Brit, but as an American, how do you view that? And the BBC being held to account for, I mean, some of the J6ers suffered years in jail because of that clip.
Look, I'm in a unique position, or an unusual one, because I was born in the UK. I mean, I was the child of refugees who escaped a communist regime. But as you started our interview, born and bred West London, and I grew up on Auntie Beeb. Whether it was Angela Rippon with the 9 o'clock news, or whether it was the Two Ronnies, or Minder, or The Professionals. That was my métier. That was my childhood. Watching Grange Hill after school, and the BBC. Okay, they didn't like Maggie Thatcher, but they weren't lunatic leftists who had hiring policies that said, no, you cannot give that job to a white man. That's internal documentation from the BBC. So it went off the rails. And when you do literal election interference, when you have a global brand, I mean, CNN maybe, but the OG international media brand was the BBC. And when they take a clip of a speech, I was there in front of the president at the Ellipse on January the 6th. And when you take a clip from the beginning of the speech and then you kludge it with a clip 52 minutes later and you say, hey, this is what he said, you are actually on the taxpayer, not even the taxpayer, the TV license, the obligatory TV license payers pound. You are affecting international propaganda to try and steal an election. There must be consequences. So right now, I don't know if the BBC is salvageable. And go online, see the way they've treated me. I'm fine with it. I rip them a new backside every time I go on BBC. But you're meant to be Auntie Beeb. You're meant to be the nation's broadcaster. And not only that, you're broadcasting out of what is meant to be the nation we have the special relationship with. So, no, God bless the president, and there are consequences to a state media organ being a propaganda purveyor.
Now, the Muslim Brotherhood, Islam is one of the biggest threats, but you also have a threat just south of the border, and that is the drug industry. And what the president has done in Venezuela, I mean, he started, I think, with the hoodies. It was back whenever he got in power in January, designating them as a terrorist organization, and has continued that vein more recently with going into Venezuela. And it seems that the president is saying to the world, I will do what has to be done. And the media are like, no, you can't send gunboats into Venezuela. You can't send troops. And the president, well, I'm doing it. Rewrite the rules of how you fight the drug cartels. Maybe touch on that, because it's
Yeah.
fascinating to watch how he's dealing with this.
So first things first, again, it's based on common sense in the new national security strategy. And originally that was meant to be a classified document. We decided, and God bless the president, to make it an unclassified document for public consumption. It was released a week and a half ago. Go read it on whitehouse.gov. Read what it says. There is the so-called Trump colliery. I can never say that word. It is the repackaging of the Monroe Doctrine. This is a historic concept that what happens in the region of America is important to America. It's like saying what happens on my street, what happens in my neighbor's backyard is relevant to my family and my home. And I'll just tell you why. It's very simple. When I had a TV show before I came into the administration, I dedicated a whole episode to this question. And I said, okay, let's do the math. From the cessation of hostilities in 1945 to the present day, I added up all the number of servicemen, US servicemen killed in combat. So that's Korea, that's Vietnam, that's Panama, Grenada, Gulf 1, Gulf 2, and the post 9/11 GWAT. You add all those conflicts together, 103,000 Americans died in uniform. Total, 70 years. Okay, let's compare that to the open border policies of the Biden administration, and let's do a compare and contrast. And I found on the CDC website, this is the Centers for Disease Control. This is the federal entity that tracks drug deaths. So drugs from overdoses, fentanyl poisoning, what have you. In the second year of the Biden open border policies that allowed the cartels to flood our nation and, illegals to come in as well, 110,000 Americans were murdered by illicit drugs. So you've got 70 years of combat, 103,000. One 12-month period, more Americans killed by the cartels. So the president said, guess what? They declared war on us, and we're going to obliterate them. And when you've got, forces of nature like Stephen Miller as the Homeland Security advisor, don't put your money on the cartels. As my immediate boss, the Secretary of State and National Security Advisor Marco Rubio said so trenchantly, he was at a press conference in Mexico after we started blowing up the drug boats. He was asked about, why are you blowing up drug boats? And he said, well, for 40 years, we've tried interdiction, intercepting them on the high seas. The cartels, the drug runners, lost between 2 and 4% of the payloads through interdiction. So they just built that into their business model, and it didn't work. So we're not going to interdict you. We're going to blow you out of the water, because every single one of those boats is going to kill tens of thousands of Americans, and we're not going to let you do that. It's very simple, Peter. All common sense.
And just like the NSS document, you've made those videos public for the world to see. Can I ask you about, just to finish off with the Muslim Brotherhood issue, and President Trump has put that EO down. It seems as though in Texas, with Abbott declaring not only the MB but also CARE and Florida following suit, and I hope and pray
Yes.
that's the first of dozens of states that do it. The White House have done this nationally. Tell us how this works, because there's this kind of 75-day where an assessment of where
Right.
you are, and then moving ahead to actually. I like your term obliterate. I hope that is actually, I don't know if that's part of the EO, but can I tell us where that process is and where it leads to make sure that you don't have those entities actually making the decisions in America and changing the freedoms that Americans have?
So I appreciate you asking the question, because one of the biggest problems we have in this administration is because the president moves so fast, we don't have a lot of time to explain in detail the ramifications and the whys and the wherefores. I had a wonderful colleague in the press team who said the following: you know what we all need to do in the Trump administration? All of us need to take 3 days off from our portfolios and just explain to everyone out there what we're doing, whether it's the tariffs, the wall, the drug boats. We've killed, let me tell you this right now, we, thanks to the incredible team that works in our directorate, the counter-terrorism directorate, and our warriors, we have killed 444 leading jihadis since January the 20th. 449. That's excluding the Houthi campaign. That's excluding the drug cartels. So we are back in business big time. So when it comes to the EO, the designation, there is a lot of misinformation, a lot of so-called experts, and a lot of fake conservatives who, for some reason, want to attack and criticize the first president who's taken the historic step to designate the progenitor of all modern jihadi organizations. So first things first, the window, the timeline, the 45 days is simply a requirement of statute. The president says, I'm designating. The government agencies, the State Department, the Treasury, the intelligence community, are then ordered to gather the evidence, and then the case is made. But really, at that point, it's a done deal, because after the deadline, the decision is formally presented to Congress, and they don't have a yay or nay choice. It's simply after the deadline, the package is delivered, and then FTO designation is de facto. It is a foreign terrorist organization. The Egyptian, the Jordanian, the Lebanese chapters are terrorist organizations. And let me be also very explicit. Those are the first chapters. I can't give you the details, but we are already preparing the next tranche of chapters to be designated, one of them which will be very of interest to our friends across the pond. Let me leave it at that. And what does it mean? It means that once it is formally delivered to Congress, a whole suite, a panoply of weapons and tools is opened for us with regards to the FBI, criminal prosecutions, and with regards to the Department of Treasury for the freezing of assets, and also for the State Department to have sanctions on movement. So if you are connected to one of these entities, you won't be allowed to travel internationally, and we're going to freeze your assets. We're going to take your assets, and you will face criminal charges. If you give £50 to the Egyptian Muslim Brotherhood, you will be charged with what is called material support to terrorism, and that is a felony. And if the conviction stands, we will lock you up and throw away the key. So a whole toolbox opens up for anyone connected to any of those organizations. With regard to the states, and God bless Texas, God bless Florida, they don't get the tools that we have at the federal level with Treasury, the FBI, and the state. But for example, the functioning of that entity, like CARE inside Texas or inside Florida, becomes impossible, because they are banned, for example, from buying property, from buying land, from leasing buildings. So it just reinforces the closing of the window against these organizations that are helping jihadists across the globe.
Well, maybe just I could ask you, looking across the water from your point of view, maybe you should. I would like you to declare the UK government as an FTO, but I will not suggest you do that. But it would be lovely for us in terms of free speech. Maybe Keir Starmer could be an FTO, but we'll leave that
Look,
to another.
all I'm going to say is, I'm not here to qualify, other governments. The people of our partners and allies choose the governments that represent them. But I will say, go back and watch Vice President Vance's speech from Munich. If you want to understand, I mean, I'm in the realm of hardcore national security, counter-terrorism. But if you want to understand this administration's commitment, the president, the vice president, the White House team to freedom of speech, and also, please, it's not a wonky document. It's a very short document. Read the NSS. What we say, what the president says in the national security strategy about what has happened to Europe and the ties that bind us to our civilizational cousins in Europe, they remain, but we are perturbed, we are disturbed by the lack of civilizational testosterone, in Europe, and we wish to see them return to the values of our Judeo-Christian culture, which are enshrined, thank the good Lord, in our founding documents here, in the Declaration of Independence, in the Constitution. And there's a reason that we say, endowed by our Creator, with a capital C. God is in our founding document, and the rights we have, we understand, and so should our European colleagues, do not come from a political elite. They don't come from a piece of paper. They come from recognizing that we have those rights because we are made in God's image. That's the only source of our rights. So we would love to see a flourishing of Europe once more, because our shared civilization, the West, is the greatest civilization the world has ever seen. Period. End of story.
Amen. Well, perfect place to finish it on. And J.D. Vance's speech in Munich was a beauty to behold and caused ructions beyond what we could imagine. But Dr. Sebastian Gorka, really appreciate your time giving us an update on what's happening in the US. And it's exciting to see how President Trump is holding many of these entities to account and is not afraid of anyone in terms of making the decisions necessary to protect all our freedoms, not only in the US, but worldwide. So thank you so much for giving us your time, Seb.
Sure. As the president said at the last few weeks of his campaign before he won the election, Americans are defined by making the impossible look easy, and the exemplar of that is himself. President Trump makes the impossible look easy, and he's doing it every day. God bless you.